My name is Tessa Joseph. Our group's project is designed to explore the effects of social pressure on adolescents' test-taking behavior. Most teenagers and young adults go through schooling, which often involves taking tests, whether it be a standardized test, such as the SAT, an AP exam, or even the MCAT, or something structured towards a specific course, such as a unit test for an economics class. In addition, most members of the young adult population have had to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic and its various effects on not only their physical and mental health, but also their social behavior. Our research question asks, how does unspoken social pressure influence test-taking behavior in students aged 16 to 18 in the United States with in-person classroom experience in the last 2 years compared to students who have been in a solely online classroom setting since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic? This question ponders a topic that doesn't have a substantial amount of knowledge associated with it, but is something that many students relate to. Some sub-questions that stimulated our thought process include, do students perform better when tested alone versus in a classroom environment? And is there a significant stress increase when exposed to social pressure? As we know, during the pandemic, most schools adapted to COVID regulations by switching to online schooling. This time away from social interactions that normally comes with an in-person setting may have altered students' perception of some social cues, and their minds may have formulated a different response to a group situation. Our sub-questions consider these aspects and build up to our research proposal.
Hi, my name is Sadiq Orakodal, and before we delve into the specifics of the experiment, let me introduce the background and the significance of the study. It is important to first understand what exactly social pressure is. Quite simply, social pressure is the influence that is exerted on an individual or group by another individual or group. Humans are social animals, and what we do and feel are constantly influenced by the people around us. We're continuously responding to social cues, and in regards to the experiment itself, constantly trying to assimilate and not be, quote, different, quote. In order to develop the basis of the study, we thought it was best to establish the connection between stress and an individual's test-taking ability. A recent study called Testing Stress and Performance, How Students Respond Physiologically to High-Stakes Testing, tested the stress increase of high-stakes testing. It was determined that due to the cortisol increase induced by high-stakes testing, students performed 0.4 standard deviations below the rest. While this study does not prove a direct link between stress and general test-taking ability, we can assume that to an extent, any induced stress will lead to a decrease in cognitive ability. With that base, we can determine if the social pressure can induce stress for an individual taking a test. Coming out of the height of a modern pandemic, we as a society are still trying to learn from the ways that this major event has changed us. Our experiment is designed to further explore and study the effects of educational changes that many individuals around the world experienced for 2 years. The US Census Bureau reports that 65% of households moved to distance learning in 2020, and while some have transitioned, many continue on this online path. It will allow us as a society to determine the unknown, positive or adverse effects this change has had and will have on an individual's ability to deal with social pressure and behavior cues.
Hello, I'm Attila Shahin, and regarding our hypothesis, we predict that unspoken social pressure will result in lower test scores. We anticipate that students who have been solely in an online setting in the last 2 years will be more negatively affected by social pressure than those who've had an in-person classroom experience. And next, we'll tell you more about our study design and methodology.
Hello, my name is Gracie Kurtz, and I'm introducing our methodology. Our methodology starts with 100 test subjects split evenly between students who have been solely online and solely in person for the past 2 years. They will start with each taking a 2-page words per minute typing test in a classroom alone while connected to an EEG headband. This will be used to monitor their stress levels throughout both tests. After the individual tests, the students will be placed in groups of 22 actors and 1 test proctor, where each student will be given a seemingly random number. This number will place the test subjects in the middle of the classroom and will be the same for each test subject. There, the proctor will introduce the test with the instructions to close their laptops upon completion, and that once everyone is finished with their test, they will all be allowed to leave. The students will all take the test then, and the actors being given tests that are roughly 20% shorter than the participants' tests to ensure that they finish faster. The test subjects are given the exact same test that they took before in the individual sessions. Once everyone is finished, they will be told the nature of the study and allowed to leave.
Next, we will tell you more about dialectic, ethical, legal, and social considerations, starting with limitations. One limitation that needs to be considered are neurodivergent students. Neurodivergent meaning differing in mental or neurological function from what is considered typical or normal. Also, due to the nature of the study will not include people with motor disabilities of hands, arms, that would hinder them to take the tests. One additional thing to consider is that people will naturally have different typing skills and speeds. In order to get around this limitation, the test's difficulty will be adjusted according to the performance of the test subjects on the first test.
Hi, I'm Sarah. When it comes to social and legal implications, if the study proves that the participants that were solely in an online setting in the last 2 years are more negatively affected by social pressure, improvements in the online learning system could be implemented in order for students to acquire social skills and learn how to deal with stress. What else can be done? Well, the rate of individual testing in schools could be increased if we find out by comparing the initial test results and the ones from the second test that students had generally better results when they were tested alone. Now, regarding ethical considerations, an advantage of this study would be that all the techniques for signal acquisition are non-invasive, since we are using EEG headbands to measure brain activity. However, something that raises ethical concerns would be that we are deliberately trying to induce stress in students in order to be able to measure how it affects their test-taking abilities. And with that, we reached the end of our presentation. We thank you for your time and attention. Also, special thanks to our team leader, Nick, who guided us at every step, to Dr. Giordano and Dr. Shuk for giving us such helpful advice and for encouraging us throughout the making of this research proposal. And last but not least, we want to thank Leadership Initiative for this amazing experience we had in the last couple of weeks. Thank you.
Yeah, this is a great presentation. It's especially timely with the recent news about standardized testing not being as prevalent as we transition from high school to college. So test taking is obviously an important issue going forward of how we, gauge education. And this project and this proposal, it really hits on that. So I just have one question for any of the presenters, and I might have missed it, but so social pressure is relatively subjective depending on the person who is receiving the social pressure. And you're trying to tie in the amount of social pressure somebody feels based off of somebody giving you the social pressure. And then you're trying to make a jump to test taking. So I was wondering how you were going to apply the social pressure, and then if you were going to gauge how much an individual feels, and anyone can answer.
So
just like before, sorry, Sarah, if you want to go ahead and turn on your video, that's going to ensure that we can see you and get the best answer. Perfect.
So the social pressure consists in the fact that the paid actors are going to finish earlier and nobody is allowed to leave until everybody finishes. But the test for the subject is made in a way that they have to finish. They need a lot of time to finish the test. So they're going to feel pressured to finish earlier because everybody's going to finish earlier than the subject. And we are we want to measure stress levels, as we said, by using EEG headbands.
That's right. I think I missed the part about the EEG headbands. I appreciate your answer. I think this is a really solid study and something that is definitely fundable as we move into study groups. So bravo.
Absolutely. All right, perfect. Thank you for your feedback. And Ms. Thompson, would you like to go next?
Sure, thank you. I agree with what JP said. I think this is really timely because we have so many students transitioning now from the online learning environment going back into the classroom. What I'd be interested to know, is there going to be a difference in results if you're an introvert versus an extrovert? And I mention this because I specifically learn much better online. I'm happier learning online, and I could see there would be pressure in moving to a classroom environment versus the online environment. Are you going to consider flipping that maybe? What about students who had been in a classroom environment and you move them to an online environment? Would there be different pressures on them? Or if they're introverted versus extroverted, are they going to respond better or worse to isolation, better or worse to socialization? Interesting ways that you could take this experiment and expand upon it. I did think this was very well presented. Tessa, particularly, I think you've got wonderful public speaking skills. I would capitalize on that. Great presentation, good job, thank you.
All right, terrific. Dr. Giordano, would you like to go next?
Sure. So I agree with both JP's initial question and its clarification was very, very important. In other words, what is the actual dynamic of social pressure? And then I think Ms. Thompson made a really, really excellent point. You know, it might be important to sort of assess the individuals coming in with regard to introversion and extroversion. The reason being is that there is some literature to suggest that introverts and extroverts process particularly social stressors somewhat differently. The introvert perhaps feeling far more stressed, but not necessarily being assertive in saying, hey, what are you guys doing? Whereas the extrovert might actually engage. The other issue that you might want to assess here that would be really, really cool is individuals' perceived locus of control. So individuals who have an internalized locus of control very often are somewhat more resistant to external stressors, whereas those who have an external locus of control. But I think that would be very interesting to do as a follow-along study. The one question I actually did have, although I liked the method, I had a question about it. You're using EEG as a measure of stress. The question that I have for you, and you needn't answer it now, is how? EEG is not a measure of stress per se, but rather a measure of, or a depiction of different types of brain waves in and across a variety of frequencies, depending on how it's utilized. And here too, we have more or less sophisticated forms of EEG that you could use. So the question that I'm posing for you is, this is interesting. If indeed there's some variation in EEG as a consequence of the social stressors, in other words, when they're beginning and then how the students respond, what is that EEG wave actually providing evidence of? The other thing you might want to do is take a little more direct measure of stress. For example, something like salivary cortisol. And that's fairly easy. It's just a cheek swab that they spit into a little jar, and then you can assay that. And again, fairly easy to do, and then you can make these correlations. But overall, I have to tell you, as Mr. DeFranco said, really relevant, really timely, and if nothing else, as a pilot study, this is exactly the kind of thing you'd want to do, because as we mentioned so many times during our time together these 2 weeks, good science doesn't necessarily answer questions. It raises ever more detailed and ever more specific questions that I think would be really useful as we come out of this post-COVID era, or into the new post-COVID era, new normal, in terms of how we then develop various working environments to accommodate individual stress. So very, very timely. Oh, booger. Very crickets. Very, very timely, spot on, well done, and I think it really provides a nice springboard for a group of subsequent studies, and that's exactly what you want to do. You want to request initial funding so as to ask ever more detailed questions about what you find at first. So well done, well done.
Perfect, thank you. And then in response to those questions you posed, I know I spoke with this group a lot about their choice of different biometrics. And Attila, I know you had mentioned you read about ERPs for the EEG, correct? Did you want to talk about that at all?
For the experiment,
you don't have to. It's okay. It's just define what aspect of the ERG you wanted to use. EEG alone is not necessarily a stress measure, but if you're looking at evoked potentials,
yeah, it's just
absolutely that's great. Cool.
Yeah, because I thought if people were under stress, there would be a spike in the EEG, and I heard that for stress specifically, there is a specific signal in the brain that you can measure. So that's why I chose.
Yeah, that's a good point. So what you want to do is you want to be able to measure their baseline EEG and then differences or variation in EEG as a consequence of exposure through a social stressor and see how those baselines then vary. Number one. Number two, you want to then correlate that to something that is a more direct measure of what might be a stress response, which might be, again, salivary cortisol or a rise in one of the immunoglobulins like immunoglobulin E, which seems to be a stress measure, very easy to do with a cheek swab. So the use of the EEG is a really good measure because what that also then does is that opens the door for further neurotechnologically directed and evaluated studies. Perfectly well done. Good job.
Awesome. All right, perfect. And Miss Lovelace, would you like to wrap it up?
Sure. Very well done, guys. Your presentation was clear and a logical flow. I liked your choice of slide design. It really helped sort of organize the material well. I have a couple of minor suggestions. One is be careful when using all caps in your fonts, especially if it's non-heading content. And the other is be careful about font weight and background colors because different monitors can display those levels of contrast differently than it might on your home screen. So what looks okay on your screen may look a little bit less, there may be a little bit less contrast on mine. So you have to be a little bit careful when using like a beige with a white. And so it's minor, but it sometimes can be distracting. So, but overall, the style was lovely and a very professional looking presentation. And yeah, well executed. Well done.
I'm going to jump on because I have the grace that comes with being the elder member of the panel. Also, to all of the prior panels as well, a real shout out, a real round of applause and kudos to our German students. I can tell you, and as you German students know, it's very difficult to lecture in a foreign language, and your English is impeccable. I mean, it's spot on, it's clear, it's articulate, and it's just fluent. It's fluent in all of its dynamics. It's fluent professionally, it's fluent colloquially. And so realistically, I must tell you, I mean, real props for those of you who are not native English speakers, whether you be German or otherwise, to be lecturing in English, if English is your second language or your third language. Outstanding. I mean, it really attests to the fact that the initiative for leadership is engaged by being multicultural, right? And also being polyglot. And you guys are on it. So bravo to each and all.